Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Heretic, a psychological, religious horror film and thriller starring Hugh Grant. I know you were excited as I was from the trailers. So it's just because Hugh Grant. I mean, he's
so good.
He's shown himself over the last more than 10 years, maybe 20, to be really into playing bastards. You know, he was obviously in the 90s, he was cute puppy dog eyes, oh darling, oh sorry.
He was always very good. And actually, I always thought it was one of the peculiarities and stupidities of the British class system that it seemed like half the population was against him purely because of what he represented in terms of class, bypassing his obvious skill as a light comedian and a hugely charismatic star.
Yeah. And a huge star he was,
Yes.
So there is also the other segment of the population that just loved him.
Actually, I'm not sure that's true because I think a lot of that popularity in the 90s, of course, there was a share of it in Britain, but it was largely driven through the US. I mean, he starred in American films, romantic comedies, etc. He was a $10 million a film leading man in those days. I'm sure that there was a sector of the population in Britain that loved him, but
I mean, those films were very successful here. Let's not pretend they weren't.
No, but there was a whole sector of the population that was like kind of really completely unreasonably kind of despised them, actually.
Yeah, sure. Well, we definitely do in this country. We do have that thing of, if you are successful, we'll do everything we can to tear you down.
It's not just if you're successful. It's really a class thing, which I imagine works every way possible. And it doesn't apply to all people, but there are some people, that kind of, a sector of the working class intelligentsia, or the intelligentsia from the working class, just takes against. And Hugh Grant is one of them, really.
I mean, we'll find any reason. If you're upper class and you're doing well, we begrudge it, and if you're working class and you do well, we begrudge that. And we'll find our reasons to do it anyway. But like I say, he's been playing bastards really nicely, and he's been getting his teeth into those kind of roles, and often they're supporting roles. This I would say, it's probably a 300, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's
the leading role, really.
He gets all of the stuff, yeah. But our protagonists are these Mormon missionaries. But you think about Florence Foster Jenkins and parts he played in Cloud Atlas, which involved many roles, and Paddington.
So Paddington, and he also was the villain in the Guy Ritchie.
The Gentleman.
The gentleman, but before that,
was he in something else?
Yeah, you've seen it with me. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He was the villain in that.
Was he?
Yes.
I don't remember. I didn't see that with you.
Oh.
I mean, I have seen it. I don't remember.
Well, he was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Was he?
Yes. In a small, showy role. Yeah. The yacht.
Mr. Waverley. Yeah, no, I didn't remember that. Anyway, so he's been a lot of fun.
He's been a lot of fun.
And he likes, I think, also playing against the persona that he's known for. He's still thought of in that way, and everything he does now has some relationship to it. Even if it's just, I would say here, it's just down to the Englishness, politeness, genteelness. It just plays off what we knew of him, but of course he's very threatening here.
And he's very good.
Yeah.
I mean, all his line readings, all his inflections, his eye gestures, it's kind of a thought-through performance, and it's really good. And of course, it is playing to a certain degree on what we know about him, but he's superb.
He is. He's absolutely. He's marvelous to watch, and I mean, there's so much close-up on him in this film, and he rings every one of those close-ups for full effect. He's doing so much with, as you say, gestures, looks, line readings, things like that. So let's say what it's about. I mean, I think from the trailer, I allowed myself, I just inherently got the wrong impression, because I assumed from the trailer that it was going to be really Catholic. And I think the reason I assumed that, because the trailer I don't think was misselling the film. I think the reason I assumed it was because of all the religions and all the denominations, the scary one is Catholicism, and the one we associate with horror films is Catholicism.
Well, that might be the one you associate with horror films. It's
of course they can all be scary, but it's the one that
it's interesting who finds what scary, because obviously I'm a Catholic, so I don't find it scary, and I think it's interesting because it obviously ties into your knowledge and understanding of particular religions. I mean, the one I find scary is those extreme Muslim religions where
it's not the religion I'm talking about.
They throw people off buildings.
It's the films, because tell me where the Muslim horror films are, the Jewish horror films, the Baptist horror films. Horror goes to Catholicism, I think, in a big way when it goes to religion.
Interesting, yes.
See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of why I think I just assumed there would be something, because I kind of thought what it would be, we get from the trailer, it's going to be these missionaries, and I didn't think for a second, they'll be Mormon. But of course, of all the religions and all the denominations that proselytize, Mormons are one of the big ones.
Yeah,
Catholics don't.
Very evangelical.
Exactly. Although I don't think I ever thought that Mormons had female missionaries. They do here, at least. I don't know how true that is. Anyway, these two girls show up, and I kind of thought what they're going to meet is a true believer, truer than them, and someone who's testing them, right? But that's not quite what we get here. What we're getting is someone who is challenging the notion of religion, challenging where it comes from. And so I said to you on the way back, whoever these filmmakers are, the writer-directors are Scott Beck and Brian Woods. Whoever they are, they spent a lot of time on Reddit, I said.
Yes, and I asked, what did you mean?
Yeah, because there is something, there's a really atheist perspective here, a really atheist kind of new atheist, which was the kind of the name given to like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, sort of Matt Dillahunty, Sam Harris, who were kind of bringing up criticism of religion in a big way in the kind of mid 2000s and 2010s. And the arguments that, if you've ever read any of them,
I read Hitchens.
Yeah, or seen their debates on YouTube, you'll have heard these arguments, which are, Jesus, because it's very often Christianity specifically that they're arguing against, although they also argue against religion in general. But it's things like all of these stories are versions of each other, so like Jesus is not the only God or martyr who was born of a virgin, who was born on December 25th, that, the other, and we go through these in the film.
Yes, we do.
We go through a number of arguments along these lines that, I've heard before, right? I'm familiar with these because I am a terminally online atheist nerd. I've heard this shit, right? It's kind of comfort food to me. I love it. So, but it was a surprise to me that's what we're getting, because it's interesting that it's not a film. I think I've said to you before that what's interesting about horror is I think it's the only mainstream genre that takes religion seriously as something that could be real. Because because the questions it tries to bring up to you is the demon that's doing this, is it real, what's going on, sort of thing. It has to get you to believe that somehow.
Yes, that and Mel Gibson films.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I say mainstream, because there's also loads of just religious films made for small budgets that are just for religious crowd sort of thing. I'm not talking about them. But that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is a conversation about belief and about why we believe what we believe. So I think it's really interesting. It's really talky, which is also my kind of thing. I love that sort of thing, especially when it's all delivered well, which I think it is.
It's also very cinematic. I mean, earlier in the day we saw Venom, which is a comic book film and so on, and I thought it was practically like cine illiterate, really. Whereas this one, which is like a chamber piece, it's basically three people in a house, right? You get a person kind of later on, but basically the whole movie is three people, largely shot in close-up, right? But it really holds your attention. Every camera move counts.
Yeah.
There is a model of the house, which is meant to kind of orientate you geographically, whilst also having a slightly kind of mystical dimension, right? Like that.
It reminded me of Hereditary, which had a similar model of the house, and I think the thing we talked about there was that it was like the I think in Hereditary it turned out to be a kind of cult that was behind all this, and it's like you're the playthings in the cult sort of world. And here, I mean, the effect is basically the same. You are the playthings, but you're the playthings in Hugh Grant's world. So yeah, just to kind of actually say, because I don't think I really did. What's happening here is these two Mormon missionaries, these young girls, played by Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. Sophie Thatcher is the kind of confident one, and Chloe East is kind of timorous, but clearly much more of a true believer, and kind of pious and so on. They've met this guy, like in a supermarket earlier, we hear them talking about it. They've made an appointment to go and see him. They go and see him, and they're assured, you know, he has a wife, she'll be in the room because we have rules about being with a man alone, we can't do that.
She's baking blueberry pie.
Exactly. And before long, we start to realise there's probably no wife coming here, and the blueberry pie turns out to be a scented candle, and we can't get out the front door, he's locked us in, and something is, you know, we're in this guy's house all night, right? And he's going to challenge us, he's going to be putting us through tests. But the thing that is, I suppose, slightly different or slightly novel is the sense of physical threat it's never absent, but I also think that you believe that no, this guy, what he's talking about is not just for effect. This is the stuff he's really interested in. He's interested in the conversation he's having with them, and there's this thing about him constantly keeping his distance from them.
And also reassuring them.
Yeah, vocalizing like
you have a choice. You've chosen this. You can choose that.
Yeah, and so the question becomes, well, the question is constantly, what is he up to, and what does he want from them? Because when he's asking them, you know, what do you believe, and what have you just seen, and so on and so forth, the outcome of what that question is going to be, you know, and how you answer it, is never clear. You have no idea what he's asking from you. I think he's like the central thing early on is. In order to get out of this house through the back, I'm going to label one door belief and one door disbelief. And from the conversation we've been having so far about whether religion is real or not, and so on, and why you believe or don't believe, I want you to be honest and choose your door. And there is no way of knowing how true what he's saying is.
Well, we later find out that both doors lead to the same place.
We later find out, right? But I'm saying at the time, like when the choice is presented, we have no, and the girls are kind of discussing it between themselves. Really, we have no idea what he wants here, and so on. And they so that's a kind of that's the play, right? That's what's going on here. Is a series of kind of tests, but it's also an involving conversation between someone who is playing with these girls, really.
I thought in that bit where they talk about religion as iterations, but kind of basically iterations of the same thing, and he goes through all the major religions, but then also he compares it to the different versions of Monopoly. I wondered if he was trying to make some connection between, you know, capital and ideology or something. And then and you think that there's obviously a reason why they chose Monopoly instead of some other game, but it kind of quickly vanishes, really.
I think it's possible to read that into it, but what I would say is this is another consequence of being terminally online, is that I recognised immediately that when you bring up Monopoly, it's something that has done the rounds online over the past few years, is did you know that the original version of Monopoly was this other thing, and it was stolen by, or taken by, you know, the guy, and he made money off it. So like, if you've been online, you know where that's going, you know where it's coming from.
So are you suggesting that the film has no depth, and it really is just a Reddit column?
I mean, I kind of do, right? This is sort of where I'm going, is that, for me, it works in all sorts of ways, and I like the conversations that it's having, but I do think that a lot of people, probably most people, because they're not interested or haven't really thought about it, are not exposed to these kind of things. They'll find those arguments and those analogies and so on quite novel, and it may make them. It may generate discussions amongst people for the very first time about what they believe, or why they believe, or why they don't, and so on and so forth. It doesn't for me, because I know where this is all coming from. I've seen it, right?
Yeah. Well, you see, I think that. I mean, I haven't. I really don't follow these things. I have a vague sense of them. Like, I'd heard that the Monopoly game had been invented by a feminist and so on and so forth. But, you know, it's kind of not something that's uppermost on my mind or very consciously there. But, you know, it's interesting that if you bring up this thing of iterations of religion as beliefs, of ideology, and then the thing about the capital, as like, this game. And then at the end, the whole thing ends up being really patriarchal. It's this man keeping all of these women under his control, right, and caged.
And he's brought up early on, he has, can I ask an awkward question? And he asks them, what do you think of polygamy? Because Mormonism has this particular history with multiple marriage, and that recalls it at the end when he's got all these women caged.
Yes.
And I mean, I think the thing ultimately that it comes to about control ends up being quite banal, right? Because one thing that he's been saying, he's not said like, I'm an atheist, I don't believe any of this. He's just been bringing up the arguments that atheists love. But what he also says is, I have found the one true religion. And if you want the one true religion, if you're brave enough and so on, then follow me and all that kind of thing. And so you're going to have to find out whether he's telling the truth, because it's not clear, maybe it's a ruse and all that, or if it is true, what that one true religion is. And what it ends up being is control.
It is. But like, I didn't understand why he went to all the trouble of playing the game at the end. So, spoilers, but there's that scene where one of the women gets killed eating the blueberry pie, and then the body gets hidden, and then really it's another woman that comes in and takes her place. And you think, why? What's the point of that step in the game? What is that meant to have on the girls? Right? Like, kind of, what is he hoping to get out of that game? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it falls apart immediately. I mean, it doesn't even fall apart. It doesn't make sense at the time. Like, what's all this about? I think the effect is quite good fun on its own terms, but at no point am I going, I really see I buy into this ever.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay, but let's turn that around, because we can agree, right? It's shallow, and some of the sequences don't seem to make sense, really. But then, why is it hugely enjoyable? Because I found it quite...
I think a massive amount of it comes down to Hugh Grant's performance. And I think what you say about a film that is so talky being rendered cinematic is true. And I think it's going to take a second or a third look to really get into that, because... I mean, it's just the most normal thing in the world is people talking. But it's... Like, I wouldn't be able to make that entertaining.
Yes.
I wouldn't have the first clue. But this film has figured it out, how to keep the camera moving and constantly like alighting on the right things to where your interest should be, and so on and so forth. I don't know. It's figured that out, and it's a really remarkable achievement of direction in that.
I think the performers are all excellent. The girls are wonderful.
Yeah, they are.
They always hold your interest. Kind of, they're giving really interesting line readings. They're really believable as the characters they play. They're also kind of indicating hidden depths and background, right? And hesitancies, and kind of in a way the rich characters, right? Like kind of this Mormon girl who chose Mormonism, who auditioned various religions, who's got a secret
birth control
device embedded in her. I mean, it's an interesting character, right? So I think the performers do a lot of credit, but there is really something about the use of the close-ups, the movement of the camera. Actually, there was also something about the luminosity of the images, right? Again, kind of very interesting in contrast to Venom, where everything seemed faded and flat, right? The faces are fleshed, kind of, they're luminous, really. The girls' faces, Hugh Grant, looks like a desiccated, old guy. Very interesting and always alive. Yeah, but the girls look like, they're obviously been lit. They look, luminescent, full of life. Yeah, kind of, faces that seem like lit from within, really.
Well, when we were talking about Venom earlier, I was decrying the state of film lighting. And this is an argument against that decrying, because the film is playing heavily with light and dark. It has this thing about the lights constantly going off, being on a timer, and that's... that scares the girls and so on, and they're walking into darkness. I mean, horror films are always doing, light and dark in that sense. But then when they get into darkness, they're still lit, right? It's not like they just blur into the background. They're, it's that kind of lighting that picks up highlights or the edge of the face and shows you where they are, and it makes it very clear what's going on, but it also makes it clear that it's in pitch black. It's in pitch black in that cinematic way. The film's very, very good at that. And I think the other thing that keeps the film exciting and interesting is that despite the fact that it is sort of silly and there are things we're not buying, we still believe in these characters. I want to know what's going to happen. I want to know what the plan is. I want to know if they'll get out of it. I want to know what Hugh Grant has planned next for them. I'm constantly asking all these questions.
Sure.
It's not an accident, right? It's fundamentally interesting.
Yes, it keeps your interest and there is suspense. I didn't like the ending. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's set up, but it also seems to come out of nowhere, right? So, the weapon, yeah, it's set up very early on. That bit of wood with the nails collapses. They put it to the side. It's going to be used, right? But then I think the film tricks you slightly because, you are meant to think that the girl is dead, and at the last minute she resuscitates like the previous woman was meant to, but they were tricked by it. But snuffs out Hugh Grant, which I thought was really
I consider it a bit of a cheat because when her throat is slit, and he's trying to revive her, and of course what we are going to eventually learn is that he doesn't believe in resurrection. He's just killed her.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was paying attention to her, kind of in the back of background and so on, for the few moments you see her after she's been attacked, and I'm sure that there is a little bit of movement in her that I think is meant to imply
that she's not really dead.
Right, exactly.
I missed that. My impression was that she was dead. Her throat been slit.
But exactly. But there is also the thing of her throat's been slit and she's been spilling blood. And if she could move a little bit just then, fine. But I don't buy that she's got the strength to, 10 minutes later.
Yeah,
after
grab
all
a
this.
stick.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of set it up just slightly if you're paying attention. It's also, I think, cheating a bit.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm not cool with it. But the thing is, so it's also a film where you think, what is its point of view? Or does it have a point of view? Or is it allowing for multiple points of view when it comes to whether you're religious or not?
It's religious.
Do you think so?
I do. Because
that's interesting.
At the end, so the film is with the young, naive believer, who is insecure in her religion and who's unsuccessful at it, but who believes, right? And the film ends with her praying and saying it's a fact that praying doesn't help, but it's still good to do because you're praying for others.
And the very last imagery of the film is the thing that she's mentioned before. She said, "When I die, I want to come back as a butterfly, and I'll follow around all the people that I know, and I'll land on their fingertips so they know it's me." And what happens at the end? A butterfly lands on her finger, but it's immediately revealed that she's just imagining this.
Yes,
and that's how it ends. And so it ends in this kind of
but it could be her friend.
Well, exactly, that's the only, it could have been her friend who, has just heard this and has done it, but of course then she's imagining it. And so it's interesting because I take that stuff, that kind of, sort of pro-religious, as it were, sort of material, as a kind of lip service. To me, the film feels very one-sided in how it privileges.
I think there's no question about lip service. I think it is lip service, but I think lip service is paid.
Sure, right, okay. So this is what I was going to say, because just as we were walking back, I thought to myself, I wonder what Christians think of this. I want to hear a Christian perspective. Because, I don't think what the Christians think about Avengers Endgame. Who the fuck cares? But this is a film that is about Christianity and about belief, and I want to hear what they have to say. So all I did was I just Googled Heretic Review and found the first Christian one I could. And I won't read loads of it, but I want to mention it because... So this is the Christian Post, christianpost.com, and the review is titled Heretic, Decent Horror Film with Surprisingly Deep Religious Belief Talk by Robin Schumacher, who at the bottom it says Robin Schumacher is an accomplished software executive and Christian apologist who's written many articles and so on and so forth. And this was interesting to me because I really agree with him. I think it's a really fair review, and I encourage people to have a look at it. One of the things that he says is the film is really heavily weighted towards the religion is bollocks side. He doesn't say it in those words. I'm paraphrasing it, but and the thing is, from a Christian, I think you might expect that and go, well, of course they want to say the film's against them. But I completely agree with him. Like, I think the film is completely on the side. All the arguments that Hugh Grant's character makes, you understand them, you buy into them, and then when the characters eventually give a bit back, so it's the more confident of the two sisters who says, he'd said, why is it that Judaism is the oldest of the religions, but it only makes up 0.2% of the world's population? It's because they don't go out proselytizing like you guys do. You're just salespeople. It's an argument against religion, against their kind of religion at least. And she comes back with, well, you didn't mention the Holocaust. Like, it's disingenuous not to do that. And like, it's kind of true, but it's also not... The argument she comes back with is an argument against the way he's argued, but you never feel like his arguments are being invalidated.
I did. I did. I thought that, she made very convincing arguments.
I think she made convincing arguments for why he was kind of arguing sort of badly or unfairly, but I think the film is completely weighted on his side. Everything that he says we're meant to be, I think also, interesting, sort of ironically, we're kind of meant to believe his salesmanship, considering that he decries them for being salespeople. The thing about, we go back to the iterations of religion thing and how there's Buddha and Jesus and Roman gods and Greek gods and Krishna and the Egyptians, and how they all their various gods and messiahs share these aspects of their stories. And he does it with a wall full of pictures that's spotlit, like that salesmanship too, And I think we're meant to...
Well, he's meant to be a lecturer, or to have been a lecturer, so...
Yeah. So I think we're being sold that in a big way, meant to buy into it. And of course there's also just the central premise, which is that he is completely in control. This is his house, and he's set up this whole evening, and they are thrust into it and are like, deers in headlights. So there's that. They can't really effectively sort of fight against this because they're victims.
There's no question that Hugh Grant gets all the arguments and whatever, but he's the villain, right? And what is the last image, right? It's kind of the girl surviving through prayer.
Well, she survives.
Well, it's not the prayer that saves her, but that is the last image. She's praying, right? And then the other girl rescues her. And actually her prayer slows down Hugh Grant, right? Because he's approaching that. There's that, then kind of the close-up look on her, right? He is looking at her praying, right? So, in film terms, he's got all the arguments, and they're convincing, and there's no question that he makes them so much and so often during the film and for so long that they carry a particular weight. But let's face it, he's the villain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the thing about whether prayer saves or not, I'm not sure I agree, because I think he's slow. He's slow because he's been stabbed in the neck, and I don't think there's an emphasis on him looking at her. I think he's just slow because he's about to kill her, and it's only the other girl attacking him that saves her. We could maybe look at it.
There's that whole discussion of the prayer. The prayer is not.
The discussion of the prayer slows him down, certainly, because they're chatting first.
Yeah, but and then she's praying. So, but she survives, and she goes into the sunlight.
She does, and I think it's definitely true that the film isn't a kind of atheism is right and atheism is the best argument. No matter how much it may kind of weight its arguments in that way. Because, as you say, he's the villain, and he's also very smug, which is one of the things that atheists are constantly kind of criticised for, is their smugness, and he really is. He has. He's not smug is maybe too far, but he's convinced of himself, and he likes being in charge, and it goes to that patriarchal thing you're talking about.
Also, he's English.
Yeah.
Which is part of the villainy outsider. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has that against him. In my book. He's not someone who is like genuinely interested in these girls. I don't think the film is kind of like, even though it might look like it, I don't think the film is kind of presenting a case of one versus the other.
Oh no, I think it's kind of you know, it's purely a mechanism, really, or a plot device, or I mean, it's the central thing, but I don't think the film takes it seriously. I mean, it could have, you know, it could have done a horror film about extraterrestrials or something. I mean, I don't think there's any deeply felt beliefs, like, you know, one way or another in the film.
No.
But, and it might just be a commercial decision, I think it does end up siding with the young girl who is the heroine, yeah, and who prays and believes, right? So, and I think that's not insignificant, even though it might just be convenient, yeah. I mean, I think, you know, that's more the faults to do with the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Scorsese would have made a different kind of film, of deeply felt beliefs or whatever. This is not that kind of film.
Well, the other thing about him is that if everything he says is true in his, you know, atheist outlook and everything is correct, there is and everything that he's doing, you go, what's the fucking point of your life? What's the point of what you're doing? What's the point of you, really? I think you kind of think that about him, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, what does he get out of it?
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, that would have been a much more interesting question for the film to explore. Is he, like, sexually inadequate? You know, what's his history? Was he unsuccessful with women that he needs to keep them all in prison? You have no sense of any of that in the film.
No. And I think it may come down to, maybe the film makers never thought about that or never considered it interesting. But I think
it's just not that deep a film. I mean,
it's not that deep a film. But I think it also comes down to a desire to keep the mystery mysterious and as mysterious as possible for as long as possible. So we're not even given clues. We're not drip-fed anything that might talk about his character or anything. Like, he is just a cipher, a vessel for the arguments that he puts forward. You see what I mean? Like, I think actually him as a character, him as a kind of personality is very rich because of the way Hugh Grant plays it and because of the way he's written. But him as a character with a history and a depth is nothing.
I mean, the film is very shallow. You know, it's kind of, and it's not a good film. And again, that's why I find it so interesting, because, you know, it's not a good film. It's quite shallow, but it's very entertaining. And you know, and I think that aspect of the reason why it succeeds with me, and I presume with other members of the audience, really revolves around the performances, particularly Hugh Grant's, and the direction. You know, kind of.
And the novelty of it, I think that's worth remarking upon as well, because I think, like I say, I was thinking before I saw it, you know, Catholicism, is it real? That's going to be the kind of thing we're going for. And it's not. It's going for, why do you believe? And these kind of more interesting or kind of fundamental questions, despite the fact, as we're saying, it's shallow about it, really. But I think there's novelty to that. Like, how many films have done that? How many films, that to me, that feels like a really new take, at least in a film like this.
Yes, I don't know.
It feels novel, and that's worth it for its own sake. I love novelty.
Mormons are in vogue now with the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and there's something funny as well with the Mormon.
And that reality television series about the wives and.
Oh, I don't know it.
Yeah, well, there's some famous television series that also dealt with polygamy and Mormons and.
There is something.
Sister Wife, maybe, or something like that.
There is something interesting about the choice of Mormons as opposed to, say, Jehovah's Witnesses. Because I think one thing that we don't really associate anything with Mormons in this country because they're very much an American phenomenon. You know, that's like a religion that was developed in America for Americans. It's like, how does America make Jesus American, right? And it says he came to America, and the Book of Moroni and all this came from, you know, the Garden of Eden was in, was it Jackson County, Missouri, or whatever it is. Like, it's adapting religion to be relevant to America in the 1800s. It's interesting. So we don't really associate it with much here because we don't really have it here. But one thing that it is associated with, if you ever come across it, or at least come across its representations in media, is that it's like super polite. They're the nicest people in the world, the Mormons. No matter if what they believe is goofy as hell, like they are. And that's what's going on here, particularly with the more timid character who is like full of that. And it's interesting. It's fun to see how that plays, just as, you know, she gets into something that's way over her head. But it's also fun to see that play off Hugh Grant, who, like, that is his persona, as we were saying. You know, that's the persona he comes from, that he developed, that he's known for. So and also then he's kind of delivering this increasing threat, and the threat kind of comes through the fact that he is so restricted about what his behaviour is. You know, like, I won't do this, I won't do that, but you're still not getting out of it. So that's kind of, I don't know, it's fun to just see these two kind of similar sort of personalities play in this scenario. That's fun.
Anyway, anything else you want to say?
No, I had a lot of fun.
Yes, I did as well. I enjoyed it. And I deserve to enjoy it because Venom was so terrible.
Yes.
So, thank you all very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.